Hello everyone and welcome to the webcast. My name is Bob Sindelar and today's topic will be MPMLink within the Windchill PDMLink software. Just to go over a quick cover of the agenda, I'll start with an introduction of myself at Eccellent Solutions, and then we'll get right into the MPMLink topics. We will be using a Windchill 10.2 M30 version for demonstration of MPMLink. First, we'll cover the definition of what the MPMLink module is and also touch on a few of the benefits that the MPMLink module provides. Next, we'll cover the basics of the objects that are introduced into MPMLink, and we'll also cover the additional capabilities that the MPMLink module provides to the PDMLink software and how to use them. We'll touch a little bit on the administration of these elements introduced in MPMLink, and then finally I will go through a short demonstration of the more common elements of MPMLink. And then we'll have a question and answer session. For those of you new to our monthly webcasts, my name is Bob Sindelar. I am a consultant with Eccellent Solutions. I've been involved in PTC products for about 7 years, specializing particularly in PDMLink change and configuration management. I have particular module expertise amongst ProjectLink, PartsLink, and Summa, amongst other modules as well. And again, just a reminder, all participants will be on mute, so if you do have any questions, please address them to the full attendee list into the chat mode, and they will the chat window in your GoToMeeting window, and they will be addressed at the end of the demo as we have time. And again, today's topic is MPMLink. So what is MPMLink? MPMLink is a seamlessly integrated module to Windchill PDMLink, much like ProjectLink, PartsLink, and Summa are also similar modules that are integrated seamlessly. MPMLink adds support to capture information about the manufacturing processes for your objects, which include process plans, steps of those processes, locations of manufacturing your objects, tools for manufacturing, and many more objects as well. The top benefits for MPMLink include a vehicle for companies to incorporate manufacturing process management data into your engineering product development management data and link them together within one combined system. With having all of this data together in one system, it truly allows you to have one entity within your software, i.e. the PDMLink part, for example, and really drive all of the required information from the engineering side to design the object, as well as the manufacturing side to manufacture that object. It also uses the same associative concepts of objects within PDMLink to further define this part and retain that information. So if you're very familiar with PDMLink and you've incorporated WT parts and all of the different relationship types, attribution, etc. that WT parts used, then you're very familiar with how this will work with MPMLink as well. And it should be relatively second nature to pick this up. So here are some of the main objects introduced with MPMLink. One thing to note here is that MPMLink is more of a broad open module, and this is more of the list of common object types that can be addressed and that will be addressed in the scope of this presentation. You'll see in the demo I provide that it's a very open-ended tool where you can really use all of these object types and more within PDMLink or even other modules to really incorporate a major overall plan into incorporating your manufacturing data in essence with your PDMLink data as well. One of the new object types I want to address is the plant object type. The plant represents the physical manufacturing facility for an operation or for an object that will be created. It's typically associated to the operation object, which will be covered a little bit later in the presentation here. But you can also associate the plant to a particular part within your installation as well. You'll see in the diagram here, there's another object type called a process plan, where a process plan is essentially a collection of operations that make up how to run the process. You can associate the process plan to a plant as well as the operations within the plant or multiple plants as well. There is also a new object type, as I mentioned, called an operation. The operation object type represents the instructions required to carry out one step of the overall manufacturing process. You'll see here that the operation can be associated to many of the other object types, including parts and plants, as mentioned before, but you can also include them into other resource objects as well, which we'll cover in the demonstration. Operations can also be nested and have sub-operations built in to further define what an operation is for any particularly large process, and they can also be built into sequences. That being said, a sequence is essentially a collection of operations. And the key point of using a sequence is to be able to incorporate this into a process plan and allow for an actual alternate routing by use of the sequence number and operation numbers for utilizing a scheme. Here we see an example where process plan 1 has operations A through E as its standard operating procedure for the main flow, but we can incorporate that making a sequence 1 with operations F, G, and H that essentially are a substitute for operations B and C, where the whole process begins with operation F right before operation B, and then ends with operation H being completed right before operation D begins. There's also, as mentioned with the operations and the sequences, they get used together to build the process plan object. The process plan object is the object that captures the overall recipe to manufacture a part. Process plans, as mentioned earlier, can be associated to a WT part object and also can be associated to a plant. So you can see from the diagram on the right here of the slide, you can actually have a multi-to-multi association for plants, parts, and process plans to define where and how an object is made, governed by any particular object. Before I go into the next page, I wanted to cover several of these additional objects underneath the plant. The work center, skill, resource group, process material, manufacturing capability, and tooling are also similar in makeup and structure to the plant object type. And what I'll show in the demonstration is how you can use those other resources as a way to fully define something that exists in a plant. And the way I'm going to do it in the demonstration is not the only way that MPMLink can be used, but it's just a suggestion on one way it can be used to organize that information. So let's talk about some of the additional capabilities that are in MPMLink. Basically, what the main way of using MPMLink will be in navigating through what's known as several explorers within MPMLink, and I will be showing 4 of them in the demonstration today. The first one is known as the Manufacturing Product Structure Explorer. This is sort of the main starting point for working with MPMLink objects. It may look very similar to the Product Structure Explorer, the standard Product Structure Explorer that some of you may be familiar with working with WT parts. It's used for working ideally with the manufacturing view. It can also be used to work with the design view. The system is open to allow either view version to be used, but for the sake of this demonstration, I will be working with a top-level assembly that's in the manufacturing view. From this particular Structure Explorer, we can actually analyze on the right. You see several tabs where you can pull in some of the other information types or object types that MPMLink encompasses, such as process plans and plants, for example. You can also launch the additional explorers, the other 3 explorers that I'm going to show as well, from this particular Manufacturing Product Structure Explorer. One of the additional explorers is known as the Process Plan Explorer, which, as it's so named, is ideally used in order to create and associate your process plans to other objects. What we see here in this screenshot is an example process plan being created where we have 3 processes within the process plan, and then we also have a sequence that's built within the process plan as well, and it will have its associated operations built into the process plan as well. The Process Plan Explorer focuses primarily on the process plans, operations and sequences, and plants. And by creating those associations, you can associate these objects back to the part from the MPSE, or the Manufacturing Product Structure Explorer. The third explorer to talk about is the Manufacturing Resource Explorer. And the resources are the list of objects that I had mentioned earlier, everything underneath the plant object type. One possible way to use these resources is to identify a plant as sort of your high or top level resource to represent your manufacturing facility, particularly if it's maybe in a different site, geographic site, than your main design facility. And what you can do with the Manufacturing Resource Explorer is build out in sort of a usage structure several of the other resource types that go into making a plant. So for example, here we have a plant that uses a process material, a resource group object type, a tooling object, and a work center type. And these relationships can be nested as well. So within the example resource group, we have 2 different inspectors. These are a skill object type with the category of inspector, which we'll see in the demonstration. And then I also have a skill underneath the example work center, which is listed as an assembler category. By using this explorer, you can fully flesh out any of these resources, particularly plants, and then associate these plants to associate back to the process plans, which then also would associate back to parts. And the last explorer to show in this demonstration is the Manufacturing Standards Explorer. Manufacturing Standards is another object type that's used to basically capture manufacturing standards as associated to particularly the plants. So here we can use this explorer to further identify the rules and regulations that plants have to use, and we can organize these standards by particular categories as well. There's an example standards, essentially a folder type object, and then from there we can drill down and create groups of these standards as well, which can be associated to the plants, which obviously get associated to process plans, and all that rolls right back into the WT part object as well. One more thing before I get into the demonstration component of MPMLink. Just an element here regarding the administration. All of these object types that I listed are also listed in the Type and Attribute Manager and are thus modifiable, similar in the ways that WT parts, WT documents, and other similar object types can be modified as well. One thing you'll also notice in these screenshots is that several of the resource object types are actually listed as a subpart within the part structure. This is done to allow those object types to take on several of the sort of functions and flavors that regular WT parts can as well, which includes being able to pull them into objects of change objects as well and process them through change and configuration management, just like you would the actual objects themselves in the engineering side. So another way to put that is if the design side of the house, the engineering side, works with the actual models, CAD models, drawings, and things like that to represent the WT part, and the WT part is the entity that represents that object, then the MPMLink side of the house takes similar information regarding the actual manufacture of the object and allows you to use similar methods from the part to build the part and further define it and incorporate that into one whole system. So now I'm going to switch gears here and switch my user over to my demo system, and we'll go ahead and start showing some of these, the navigation and creation of objects within these explorers. So bear with me a minute while I switch. Okay. So I'm going to log into my Windchill MPMLink system. And the first thing I'm going to do is search for I'm actually going to resume the definition and further creation of these types of manufacturing objects on a top-level assembly I've already worked with. So I'm going to first search for my top-level assembly item. You can see here I have multiple versions as well, and I had started working on a manufacturing view version of the assembly. So I'm going to go access this object as well. And in order to get into the actual modification of MPMLink components, I need to start opening my MPMLink explorers. So the easiest way to do that is from the details page of an object. Under actions, there's the open in dialog box, and I'm going to select manufacturing product structure explorer. Now this is one of PDMLink's Java utilities. So if you do run into just a quick security check on the Java utility, just go ahead and allow it, like several other objects. And after a few seconds here, my Explorer will open up, and what it'll do is it'll pull in my top-level assembly item, since that's the reference that I added to select it. And it'll also show me my WT part usage structure, which I can drill down as well and see all the additional components of my items as well. Now again, I had mentioned that in the scope of this demonstration, I just wanted to cover more of the creation components of the MPMLink objects, as there are several different other elements as well that can be used within Windchill. Some that are also PDMLink topics to begin with, but can just be used in a different place. So here, I'm just going to cover what I talked about in the slide deck. We can see here that in all the tabs on the right, there are several different items we can address if we want to cover information about this top-level assembly. If I go in the Uses tab and I'm highlighting one of the parts here, I can see what parts that they use in the Explorer, which is pretty useful to look at the first level down item. To take a look at the actual objects that have been incorporated from the MPMLink side, I can see my Process Plans tab, where I have here two different process plans that are associated with Windchill. One with the example, I have an example process plan and a second plan here, which I'll show how to create and associate as well. We also have in the Plants tab the ability to add associated plants into the system here as well. So what I'm going to do is actually kind of work from the ground up, and I'm going to start by defining a new plant and create a process plan and associate that, and then come back and associate my process plan back to my part object. So what I'll do is from my Manufacturing Product Structure Explorer, if I go to the View tab here, I can open up any one of those three other explorers here. So since I want to create a process plan, I can go to the second explorer we talked about, the Process Plan Explorer. And it'll open up a new window. And at this point, there won't be anything in my window because I just said open up the Explorer, and I did not ask to open a particular process plan. So here what I'll do is under File, I'll create a new process plan. And again, everything that's listed in this wizard is all completely out of the box, but can all be additionally attributed and modified in very similar ways that PDMLink objects can as well. So I'm going to leave my default information here. And here I see that there's a category attribute. Maybe we'll call this a quality process plan. I'll give it a name, because that's a required attribute. I can also give it a description. One thing we're going to note here, and this is This can be changed and designated based on initial object initialization rules as desired. But one thing I'm going to do just as a rule of thumb is continue to work in my manufacturing views, since these are manufacturing objects. Like I said before, a lot of these objects are based off of similar concepts as the part, the WT part object. So you will see that you can have a design and a manufacturing view as necessary. So once I've finished all the elements here, I'm going to hit OK. What we may see is some messages regarding the fact that I opened in design view, but I'm creating a manufacturing view, which is fine. I'll just go through and let the system make those changes. And there we go. I've got my process plan built right here. So this is just the initial item of the process plan. And there's really not much information that's going into this process plan. That's usually where we get the operations as well. So in order to create operations, operations work with process plans in a similar way that WT part child components work with their parent assemblies. So what we'll do is we'll go to the Uses tab in order to create new operations. And what's kind of nice about these explorers is that they have a little more of a seamless checkout, check-in functionality here. Instead of popping up side actions using right-click methods, there's a toolbar right here with these little icons that just kind of do a quick access checkout process. Now what you see is I checked out my demo process plan, and it actually enabled a few of the icons within my Uses tab here for the operations. So I'm going to do is insert an operation, and we'll see there it just gives me this default information for the operation, which I can always come back and change, or I can always allow creation through a wizard as well if I needed to. I'm just going to go through here and make a couple quick operations to flesh out my plan. And if I want, I can also create a sequence here. So I'm going to insert a new sequences now as well. Go through my wizard here. Again, I'm going to stay in my manufacturing space. I can also decide if this is a parallel sequence or an alternate sequence. And again, these are types of items that can obviously always be changed. Here I'm going to designate my branching operation as coming from 20, operation 20, and we'll return at operation 40. I can also decide there's a branching lag and return lag in the operations. Again, these are out-of-the-box values and don't have to be filled in. And for the sake of the demonstration and for time, I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK, just to show the creation of the sequence object. And from here, if I want, since I'm going from 20 to 40, I can further check this out. Again, I'm just using a right-click there, but it's the same thing as using the icons up here. And I can sub-operation the sequence as well. And here, I'm going to adjust my labels so that it associates with the objects I was looking into. Just like the we used in the in the presentation as well. So I'm only going to 40. So if I come back before 40 and start after 20, that incorporates 2 more objects in my scheme. And we'll see that once I'm done with this information, I can simply check in my objects. So I'll check in my sequence, and then I'll come back and I'll check in my process plan. And there we go. Now I have a process plan that I can associate with additional objects. So let's get into the third of the explorers that I had mentioned. And I'll go to my Manufacturing Resource Explorer. Again, I did this from the Process Plan Explorer this time. And there's a View menu where I can just go to the Manufacturing Resource Explorer. And what I'm going to do is start by creating a new resource. And you'll see that the plant is the default. There are other resource types as well. But I'm going to start by creating a plant and then build resource objects that go into the plant. So I'm going to satisfy the initial information. Again, I'm going to stay within my using manufacturing as my sort of rule of thumb here regarding the views. I can also provide address information if I want to. Provide some information there. One thing to notice here is, like I said, it is similar to the WT part in the structure. If you do have parts link, you can actually choose to associate the classification for parts link to go with your plants as well. This could actually be very useful if you have particular plants associated with particular object types that they create, such as if they're hardware or tooling components and so forth. So you can actually associate the plants in the same way as well with those classifications. So again, I'll go through these icons to make my change to the manufacturing view. I have my demo plant, and I'm just going to go ahead and check this demo plant out. Go to my Uses tab, and I'll add just a few more resources. I'm actually going to create new ones here. Just a few more resources to my plant. We'll say that I've got some tooling. Say it's a fixture. And I'll just add one more for the sake of the demonstration. We will add a process material. And as you notice, in the different resource types have different resource categories as well that correlate to the types of information that they have. So this kind of helps associate those hard to model items or hard to account for items within BOMs, because you can cover the fact that maybe you use lubricant as needed when you're building a particular item. So I could do there is say my lubricant and just say as needed. So that's one thing that's pretty useful here with using the actual resource objects rather than without using MPMLink, you kind of have to use a WT part to satisfy that requirement as well. So there's my two objects here for my demo plant. I'll go ahead and check this plant in and save my changes. And now that I have that demo plant, I'm actually going to go back to my still open Process Plant Explorer. And under my Plants tab, if I go and check out this object again, I'm going to go search for an existing plant, particularly the plant that I just created, this demo plant. And now I can associate it to my process plan, just like that. Once the process plan and the plant are associated, I could check in my process plan. And if I really want to as well, now that I have this plant, I can actually associate the plant to the part itself, not just the process plan. So to show that, I will check out my top assembly here, which is already associated to an example plant, but I will also search and associate it to my demo plant. Check in those changes. There we go. Now I have that plant information as well. So the last explorer to go over real quick would be the last explorer, at least in the scope of this demo, would be to go over the Manufacturing Standards Explorer, which again can be seen from any of the view drop-downs. I'm using the Resource Explorer here, but you can get it from Process Plan or Structure Explorer. And here I can create a new standard group. It's of the type Manufacturing Standard Group. Again, I'm going to stick with my manufacturing rule of thumb, go through my change of filter here in the Explorer view. And we see that now that I have a standards group, again under the Uses tab, if I check out my object, I can either subgroup it or I can create my manufacturing capability or standards underneath. So I'm going to create my capability. We'll say this is of quality, since I had a quality plant. Give it a name. Now that I have that quality capability, I can also go back to my standards group, or I could do it from the standard itself. But since I already have it checked out, I'll do it from the group. And I'll associate that plant that I had already created, my demo plant. And once I've got that information on my standards all set up, I can go ahead and check in my object. So basically what we've just done here is, for the top level assembly item I have, I created a process plan. In that process plan, I set up some example or default process plan steps and included a sequence that occurs as an alternate route. I then created a process plan, or excuse me, I created a plant to associate that process plan to, which we see here, this demo plant. And from that, within that demo plant, I added a process material and tooling to that plant, and then also created a manufacturing standard object that could associate to that plant, and thus pulling all of these items together to the WT part. So finally, I'm going to close up all of these explorers and go back to my main Windchill page. And based on the way that the out-of-the-box system is set up, all these were created from the assemblies library. It's the name of a library I have here where the object was set up. And in this assemblies library, the objects are set up to just exist at the base level. So all those objects that I created, we'll see them here now as regular objects. And one of the things that we can note here is that the objects that are similar in WT part structure or makeup within Windchill, you can actually use the right-click menu and see very similar items that you would see at a WT part, particularly even the way to launch change objects within these objects as well. So it's kind of like being able to associate your whole manufacturing side of your house entirely with the PDMLink side workflow-driven items. So it's a pretty cool, useful tool to be able to do that, capture all of this information. I believe you can see why I didn't go into a lot of dedicated deep detail into this information, as there's many different ways you can implement this out. And again, the way I have shown how to do things is by far not the only way to do things. It's just one suggested method. So I'm going to switch back to my slide deck here. And I just have one more item here in my slides. Just a couple final thoughts regarding this particular presentation. As you saw me mention at the end of the demo, you can incorporate all the change objects as well with your MPMLink objects. So it is highly recommended that Windchill change and configuration management is implemented at least to an initial degree, and that you have workflows running so that when you do get MPMLink content, you have the ability to maintain that as well. Eccellent does have expertise in MPMLink implementation, which includes the creation of MPMLink objects and consulting on the implementation strategy as well. Again, if you have additional questions, feel free to send me an email. My information is there as well. And now what I'd like to do is take a quick look at the chat log and take a look and see if there's any additional questions. Looks like we have just a couple questions here. One question was, is 10.2 a requirement for MPMLink? The answer is no. Windchill MPMLink has been around for multiple versions. I want to say at least as far back as 9.0. It may be even older than that, but it's not that it's been new since 10.2. We were just showing the 10.2 release here going forward. One other question I have written here is, have I seen this work in Windchill 11? Personally, I have not seen or had a chance to test it in Windchill 11 just yet. I also ask, the question is asking if this is with or without Java. The Explorers do use Java on the client side, and I don't know if that's going to be a particular conflict. Feel free to send me an email for additional questions regarding the Java requirements, but I can't imagine that there wouldn't be support for MPMLink with Windchill 11. Going further, as Windchill 11 comes out and we get more and more comfortable with the release and it goes through some maintenance releases, I would imagine we'll start giving these monthly webcasts in a Windchill 11 system as well. Another question regarding 10.2 now supporting multiple CAD owners. Can MPM handle the same function? MPM itself is not really correlated to the actual CAD, so one way to really answer that question is, sure, it would support it because the MPMLink side of the house doesn't actually deal with or conflict with the actual CAD components of Windchill. The CAD side is really still based upon the PDM-Link side of the house with engineering. So basically, if you can make a BOM with Windchill with your W2 parts, then the W2 part object is what will go ahead to continue to create that association with the MPMLink side of the house. Looks like there aren't any additional questions at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and close up this demonstration. But again, feel free to send me an email about this or any other of the webcasts we've given. Just to recall, in October we gave a webcast on PartsLink module, and in November we gave a webcast on the SUMA module. And this webcast, as well as those, are available, or I should say this one will be soon available, but the other two are currently available at our website at www.eccellent.com. Again, my name is Bob Sindelar. Feel free to send me an email if you have any additional questions, and have a great day.